And we got to go back to this controversy. In light of this controversy involving President Trump's reported comments to the widow of a fallen service member, I want to read a response that really stood out to me, someone who knows very little about the military. They come from former U.S. Army Captain Brandon Friedman. He served in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and he says, quote, "Let's talk for a minute about, quote, he knew what he signed up for," which is something that President Trump did say to a widow. Quote, "There's often a misconception among non-veterans that service members sign up with the expectations that they may die." He goes on to say, "I did 2 tours in combat as an infantry officer, and I never met a soldier who thought dying was a reasonable result of their service. Take the numbers. Since 9/11, roughly 1 out of every 5,000 troops to serve in Iraq or Afghanistan die there. I'll say it again. 1 out of every 5,000 dying in combat. That is neither common nor expected. But when things do get dicey, troops expect leaders at every level to do everything in their power to keep death from happening. Take roadside bombs. When they began killing U.S. troops, President Bush never said they knew what they signed up for. Instead, DOD designed MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles. It was a concerted effort to keep more people from getting killed unnecessarily. And that is what keeps troops going. The knowledge that your life is valuable, that it is not being wasted, that air support is inbound." He goes on to say, quote, "So when we have a commander-in-chief respond to a combat death with, 'he knew what he signed up for,' it tells us a few things. First, it tells us that the president has no idea how the military works or what his role and responsibilities are. More importantly, it sends a message to troops. If you are looking for support from the White House, you know what you signed up for." Joining me now is the veteran who wrote that, former Captain Brandon Friedman. Brandon also served in the Department of Veterans Affairs under President Obama. Obviously, you know a lot about the military. I don't want to spend our time parsing through what the president said or what he knows. I want you to help us know, what do our officers sign up for?
Well, people sign up to be a part of something that's larger than themselves. They want to serve. They want to serve their country. They want to help make the world a better place. And they do it selflessly. And when we hear the president talk about this stuff every day, it's almost as if everything to him is transactional. He doesn't quite get the selflessness of serving your country.
So what should we know? Those who are fighting for our democracy, who are overseas, what does their life look like every day there and when they come home? Because it's so important to remember their lives when they come home and our responsibility to them.
Yeah, well, when you're over there, I mean, you're very focused on the mission, and that takes up all of your time. But you don't necessarily wake up every day thinking that you're going to die. I mean, everybody who joins assumes that risk, and you know it's a possibility. But it's not what you focus on day in, day out. You focus on accomplishing the mission and getting that done. And then when you get home, you try to support the people who are still over there doing their jobs.
How hard is it to come home? What's it like?
I mean, it's different for everybody. You know, in my case, you know, it's pretty rocky when you go into combat and you come home. It's I mean, it can be it's kind of a hard break between what you're doing over there and when you come home. It's a lot different here, and you have to work very hard to sort of reintegrate yourself, and you have to rely on your friends and family and that sort of thing.
It's also hard to make that call, and we're discussing at length the president reaching out to these Gold Star families, whether it was offering the $25,000 to one family or his word choices with another. That's a very difficult call to make. What can our government do or our leaders do to help those families? I can't imagine that it's just a phone call that is what they need the most.
Well, right. I mean, you want to offer your condolences, but what families want the most is to know that they're going to be taken care of. And when you haven't had someone die in combat, you want to know that your loved one serving overseas is going to be taken care of, and that the government is going to do everything in its power, and the president is going to do everything in his power to make sure that they're taken care of. What you don't want is a president who's going to shrug when something like this happens and say, well, he knew what he signed up for. That's an abdication of his responsibility, and it sends a message to our troops, and it sends a message to their families that we have a president who is not willing to take on that responsibility that he has for the well-being of these troops over there.
Well, we can tell those troops and their families how much we care, and we appreciate it. Does it surprise you that 2 weeks out, there's still so much confusion over what happened there? John McCain said he hasn't been briefed. You tell me, is 2 weeks a long time, a short time? I mean, this is a very remote part of Africa.
Yeah, well, look, everything that happens in combat is confusing. I mean, that's why we have the term fog of war. I can't speak to that specifically. I wasn't there. I haven't talked to anybody who was there. But it's not unusual for there to be a lot of confusion, for it to take a long time to figure out what happened. I would expect that at this point, a couple of weeks later, that we would know a little bit more about it than we have actually heard.
I certainly hope we will, but we're going to keep focusing on it. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your words on Twitter. For people like me, we learned a lot.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
All right.